The massive alien ship hung in space, like a dark metal mountain. Its surface was covered in strange symbols that glowed with blue light. Inside the ship, Ambassador Jake Morrison walked down a long hallway. His boots made soft sounds on the smooth floor. He carried a small bag in his hands. Jake was nervous, but he did not show it. He had trained for this moment for 3 years. Today was the first time humans would meet the Velthran Empire face to face. The Velthrans ruled over 12 star systems. They had weapons that could destroy planets. They thought humans were weak and stupid. The hallway ended at huge double doors. The doors opened without making any sound. Jake stepped into a room that was bigger than a football field. The ceiling was so high he could barely see it. Strange lights floated in the air. Like tiny suns dotted at the far end of the room sat 3 aliens on tall chairs that looked like thrones. The aliens were tall and thin with green scaly skin. Their eyes were yellow and cold. They had no hair on their heads. Long claws grew from their fingers. The alien in the middle chair was the biggest. He wore a cape made of some kind of metal. Fabric. This was High Chancellor Zek-Skar, the ruler of the Velthran Empire. To his right sat a female alien with many small scars on her face. She was Dr. Tisara, their top scientist. The third alien was a general with marks of rank burned into his scales. Jake walked forward slowly. He stopped when he was 20 feet, away from the thrones. He bowed his head in respect, but did not kneel. The humans had decided that bowing was enough. Kneeling would make them look too weak. "I am Ambassador Jake Morrison," he said. "I speak for all humans on planet Earth. We are honored to meet the great Velthran Empire." High Chancellor Zek-Skar leaned forward in his chair. When he spoke, his voice was deep and rough like grinding stone. "So you are the humans we have heard about. You live on one small world at the edge of our space. You have no real weapons, no real ships. What could you possibly offer to an empire like ours?" Jake smiled. He had expected this. The Velthrans thought they were better than everyone else. They had conquered many worlds by scaring other races into giving up without a fight. But humans were different. Humans did not give up easily. "We offer friendship," Jake said, "and knowledge. Humans have learned many things in our long history. We know how to survive on worlds that kill other races. We know how to grow food where nothing should grow. We know how to make life from death." Dr. Tisara made a sound that might have been laughter. "You live on world," she said. "We have shaped the landscapes of hundreds of planets. Our bioengineered forests can change the weather. Our crystal trees can mine metals from the ground and build cities by themselves. What could primitives like you teach us about growing things?" Jake reached into his bag. He pulled out a small pot with a plant in it. The plant had broad green leaves and tiny white flowers. It looked very ordinary. Nothing special about it at all. "This is our gift to you," Jake said. "A plant from Earth. We call it a symbol of human spirit. It represents how we survive and grow, even when others think we cannot." The 3 aliens stared at the plant. High Chancellor Zek-Skar looked confused. "That is your gift? A weed?" "Not just any plant," Jake said. "This one is special. It can grow almost anywhere. It adapts to new places very quickly. It finds ways to survive when other plants die, just like humans do." Dr. Tisara stood up from her throne. She walked down to look at the plant more closely. She pulled out a small device that looked like a metal wand. She pointed it at the plant, and lights blinked on the device. "Interesting," she said after a moment, "but not very impressive. The biological readings are quite simple. This plant has basic root systems, standard leaf structures, and primitive reproductive organs. It would never survive in our engineered environments. Our crystal forests would consume it in hours. She turned to the High Chancellor. This plant is exactly what I would expect from a primitive species. It has no special abilities, no unique properties. It cannot even defend itself from basic threats. The general, who had been quiet until now, finally spoke. "Is this a joke?" he asked. "We offered to meet with your species as a courtesy. We expected you to bring something useful. Technology we could study. Weapons we could examine. Resources we could trade. Instead, you bring us a common plant that will die the moment we put it in real soil." Jake kept smiling. "I understand your disappointment. But this plant has survived on Earth for many centuries. It has spread to every continent. It grows in forests, in deserts, on mountains, in swamps. Other plants cannot go where this one goes. Animals cannot eat enough of it to stop it. Even our strongest chemicals cannot kill it permanently. It always comes back." "Impossible, Doctor," Tisara said. "My scans show this plant has no special defenses, no toxic compounds, no hardened structures, no adaptive mechanisms. It is completely ordinary." "Maybe your scans are not looking for the right things," Jake said quietly. High Chancellor Zeekskar waved his hand. "Enough. We will accept your gift as a sign of good intentions between our peoples. Perhaps it will make an interesting decoration. In our botanical archive, Dr. Tisara will study it more carefully later. Maybe she will find something your primitive science missed." Jake bowed again. "You honor us by accepting our gift. I hope it will remind you of the friendship between humans and Valthrans for many years to come." As Jake left the great room, he could hear the aliens talking quietly among themselves. They were still laughing about the useless plant the stupid humans had brought them. They thought it was funny that such a weak species would offer such a pathetic gift. Jake smiled as he walked back down the long hallway. Let them laugh, he thought. In a few months, they would not be laughing anymore. They would understand what it meant when humans said a plant could survive anywhere and grow under any conditions. They would learn that sometimes the most dangerous weapons looked like the most harmless gifts. The small plant sat in its pot on Dr. Tessera's table, looking innocent and weak. Its white flowers moved slightly in the air current from the ship's ventilation system. Deep in its roots, changes were already beginning to happen. Changes that no alien scanner could detect. Changes that would transform an entire world. 3 months had passed since the meeting between humans and Valthrans. The alien ship had returned to their home world of Velfara Prime. The planet was beautiful in a cold way. Tall crystal towers reached up to touch the purple sky. Gardens of glass trees sparkled in the light of 2 suns. Everything was perfectly arranged and controlled. Nixtal walked through the Grand Botanical Archive, carrying the human plant in its small pot. He was a groundskeeper, one of many workers who took care of the plants and trees in the massive dome. The dome was bigger than most cities. Inside it grew plants from hundreds of different worlds. Nixtal did not like his job very much. The work was boring, and the other Valthrans treated him badly because he was from a lower class. But today was different. Today he was carrying something that had been touched by aliens from another star. Even if it was just a stupid plant, it made him feel important. He found an empty spot in Section 7 of the archive. This was where they kept plants that were not very interesting. Most visitors never came to this part of the dome. Nixtal set the pot down on a metal shelf between a fungus from the Kree system and some moss from a moon near the Empire's border. The human plant looked very small and sad in this place. Its green leaves had turned a little brown around the edges during the long journey. Some of its white flowers had fallen off. Nixtal felt sorry for it. He gave it some water and made sure it was in a spot where it would get enough light. "Do not worry, little plant," he said quietly. "No one cares about you, but I will make sure you do not die." On the other side of the dome, Curator Sindara was finishing her daily reports. She was in charge of the entire botanical archive. It was an important job that made her feel proud. She kept detailed records of every plant in the collection. She wrote papers about them that other scientists read. She was respected throughout the empire for her knowledge, but the human plant was not worth her time. She had looked at Dr. Tisara's scan results. The plant was completely ordinary. It had no useful properties. It could not survive in different environments. It could not be used to make medicines or materials. It was just a weed that somehow the primitive humans thought was special. Sindara filed the plant's information under minor specimens, low research priority. She assigned it a number, plant sample 47,291. She wrote one line about it in her records. Gift from human species. Basic terrestrial flora. No significant biological value. That was all the attention the plant would get from her. She had more important things to worry about. The empire was expanding again. New worlds meant new plants to study. Plants that might actually be useful for something. Far away on Earth, Dr. Lisa Parker sat in her laboratory, reading a message on her computer screen. The message looked like a normal scientific report about plant growth rates. But hidden in the numbers and technical words was a code that only she could understand. The message was from Jake Morrison. It told her that the plant had been delivered successfully. It was now in the Velthren Botanical Archive on their own world. Phase 1 of their plan was complete. Dr. Parker smiled as she deleted the message. She was one of only 12 people on Earth who knew the truth about the plant they had sent to the aliens. It was not just any plant. It was the result of 20 years of secret research by Earth's best scientists. They had started with kudzu, a vine that grew wild in the southern parts of America. Kudzu was famous for growing fast and spreading everywhere. Farmers hated it because it could cover entire fields in just one growing season. It could climb trees, cover buildings, and choke out other plants, but natural kudzu was not enough for what the humans needed. Dr. Parker and her team had changed it. They had added genes from other plants. Genes that would let it survive in different types of air. Genes that would let it eat different kinds of soil. Genes that would let it adapt to new environments faster than any natural plant could. The most important change was invisible to any normal scanner. Deep in the plant's DNA was a program, almost like computer code. For the first 6 months after being planted, this program would keep the plant dormant. It would look weak and ordinary. It would grow slowly and seem harmless. But after 6 months, if the plant detected that it was in a stable environment, the program would activate. The plant would begin to change. It would start analyzing everything around it. It would learn how to survive and grow in its new home. And then it would begin to spread. Dr. Parker looked at her calendar. 3 months had passed since Jake delivered the plant. 3 more months to go before the real test began. She wondered if the Velthrans were taking good care of their gift. Back on Valthara Prime, Nixtal was making his weekly rounds through Section 7. He checked each plant to make sure it was healthy. Most of them were doing fine. The climate control systems in the dome were very advanced. They could create the perfect environment for plants from any world. When he got to the human plant, he stopped and stared. Something was different. The plant looked healthier than it had 3 months ago. Its leaves were greener. It had grown new flowers to replace the ones that had fallen off. It even seemed a little bigger than before. This was strange. Dr. Tisara had said the plant could not survive in their environment. She had predicted it would die within a few weeks. But here it was, not only alive but actually growing. Nixtal made a note in his daily report. Plant sample 47,291 showing unexpected resilience. recommend continued monitoring. He did not think anyone would read his note. Groundskeeper's reports were usually ignored, but it made him feel better to write it down. In her office, Curator Sindara was reading reports from her staff. Most of them were boring. Plants were growing normally. Temperature and humidity levels were stable. Everything was working as it should. She almost skipped over Nick Stahl's report. Groundskeepers rarely had anything important to say, but something about his note caught her attention. Why would the human plant be showing unexpected resilience? According to Dr. Tisara's analysis, it should be dead by now. Sindara made a mental note to check on the plant herself sometime soon. But she was busy with preparations for a visit from officials from the capital city. Important people who wanted to see the most impressive specimens in the archive. The human plant was definitely not impressive enough to include in their tour. Meanwhile, deep in the roots of the human plant, microscopic changes were happening every day. The plant's special genes were slowly analyzing the soil, the air, and the water in its new environment. They were learning how to process the different minerals in Valthron soil. They were adapting to the different gas mixture in the dome's atmosphere. The plant was preparing for the day when its dormancy period would end. When that day came, it would be ready to grow and spread faster than any Valthran had ever imagined possible. It would show them what human ingenuity could really do. But for now, it waited patiently in its small pot in Section 7, looking innocent and harmless. Just a simple plant from a primitive world, growing quietly in a forgotten corner of the Empire's greatest botanical collection. 6 months had passed since the human plant arrived at the Grand Botanical Archive. Colvin was doing his morning maintenance check in Section 7. He was new to the job, only working at the archive for 2 weeks. His job was to look for problems that the automatic systems might miss. He walked slowly between the shelves, checking each plant. Everything looked normal until he reached the area where the human plant was kept. Colvin stopped and rubbed his eyes. Something was wrong with what he was seeing. The human plant was no longer in its small pot. The pot was still there, but thin green vines had grown out of it. The vines were creeping along the metal shelf and reaching toward the ceiling. Some of them had found their way to the support beams of the dome itself. Colvin counted at least 12 separate vines. Each one was as thick as his finger. They had small leaves growing along their length. At the ends of some vines were clusters of white flowers that gave off a sweet smell. This was impossible. The plant had been in a sealed containment pot. The pot was designed to keep plants from spreading. No plant should be able to grow outside of its container without special permission from the curators. Colvin pulled out his communication device and called his supervisor. "This is Colvin in Section 7. I need to report a containment breach. Plant sample 47,291 has somehow escaped its container." His supervisor's voice crackled through the device. "That is impossible. Check your location again. You must be looking at the wrong plant." "I am certain this is the right plant," Colvin said. "It is the human plant, the one with white flowers. But it has grown vines that are spreading throughout this section." There was silence for a moment. Then his supervisor said, "Stay where you are. Do not touch anything. I will contact Curator Sindara immediately." 20 minutes later, Sindara arrived in Section 7 with 3 other staff members. She was not happy about being disturbed during her morning research time. When she saw the plant, her expression changed from annoyance to confusion. "This cannot be right," she said. "Dr. Tisara told us this plant could not adapt to our environment. She said it would die within weeks." One of the staff members, a young scientist named Pex Ara, was examining the vines with a portable scanner. "The readings are very strange," she said. "The plant tissue shows adaptation to our atmospheric composition. It is processing our air, mixture more efficiently than our own native plants. Sindara felt a cold feeling in her stomach. Run a full biological analysis. I want to know how this happened. While Pexara worked with her scanner, Sindara tried to understand what she was seeing. The containment pot had not been damaged. There were no cracks or holes that would allow roots to escape. Yet somehow the plant had found a way to spread beyond its boundaries. Curator, Pexara said, you need to see this. The plant has somehow connected to our irrigation system. Look here. She pointed to where one of the vines had grown into a small opening in the wall. The opening was meant to allow water pipes to pass through. It was barely big enough for the thin vine to squeeze inside. The vine has grown into the water distribution network, Pexara continued. It is using our own system to spread nutrients and possibly genetic material to other parts of the dome. Sindara stared at the vine disappearing into the wall. How is that possible? Our irrigation systems are sealed. They have filters and purification systems. Nothing should be able to survive in those pipes. The plant seems to have developed resistance to our water treatment chemicals, Pexara said. In fact, it appears to be neutralizing them. The chemical. Readings in this section are different from the rest of the dome. On Earth, Dr. Lisa Parker was in her laboratory when her computer chimed with an incoming message. She opened the encrypted communication and read the contents quickly. Her heart started beating faster. The message was from one of their intelligence agents, working undercover on a Velthren trade station. The agent had overheard communications about a problem at the Botanical Archive on Velthara Prime. Something about a containment breach involving an alien plant specimen. Dr. Parker immediately sent a coded message to Jake Morrison and the other members of their secret team. The message was simple. Phase 2 has begun ahead of schedule. Prepare for Phase 3. She then opened her research files and began reviewing the plant's designed capabilities. Everything was working exactly as they had planned, just faster than expected. The Velthrin environment was apparently more suitable for their modified kudzu than their computer models had predicted. Back on Velthara Prime, Sindara was trying to figure out how to handle the situation. She had called Dr. Tisara, but the scientist was busy with military research and could not come to the archive until the next day. Sindara decided to try removing the plant herself. She ordered her staff to bring cutting tools and containment equipment. If they could cut away the vines and put the plant in a stronger container, maybe they could stop it from spreading further. But when they tried to cut the vines, they discovered another problem. The plant tissue was much tougher than it looked. Their normal cutting tools barely made scratches on the vine surface. When they finally managed to cut through one vine, green sap leaked out and made their equipment stop working properly. The sap has acid properties, Pexara reported. It is eating through our metal tools. Worse, within an hour of cutting the vine, 2 new vines had grown from the cut end. The plant was not just resistant to their efforts to stop it. It was actually growing faster because of what they were doing to it. Sindara felt panic rising. In her chest, this was not a normal plant. No plant should be able to do these things. She began to suspect that the humans had not been honest about what they were giving to the Empire. She tried calling High Chancellor Zexkar's office, but was told he was in meetings about military expansion and could not be disturbed. She tried calling the Science Council, but they were all busy with their own projects. Finally, she decided to implement emergency containment protocols. She sealed off Section 7 and activated the strongest biosuppression systems available. These systems released chemicals that could kill any known form of plant life. But when she checked the next morning, she found that the human plant was not only still alive, it had grown even more during the night. The vines now covered most of Section 7. Some of them had reached the ceiling of the dome and were starting to spread along the top. most terrifying of all, she found evidence that microscopic spores from the plant had entered the dome's air. Circulation system. The spores were so small that the air filters had not caught them. They were now being carried throughout the entire botanical archive. Sindara realized that this was no longer just a problem with one plant in one section. The human plant was spreading throughout their most important research facility, and she had no idea how to stop it. She sat in her office and composed an urgent message to Dr. Tisara. Emergency assistance required immediately. Alien plant. Specimen showing unprecedented growth and adaptation. Standard containment methods have failed. Request immediate consultation and advanced suppression protocols. As she sent the message, Sindara looked out through her office window at the dome. In the distance, she could see patches of green that had not been there yesterday. The human plant was claiming territory faster than she could track it. For the first time since becoming curator, Sindara wondered if she was dealing with something beyond Velthrin science to control. She wondered if the humans had sent them. More than just a simple plant. She wondered if they had made a terrible mistake by accepting the gift from Earth. 2 weeks after Sindara sent her emergency message, Dr. Tisara finally arrived at the Grand Botanical Archive. She had been busy with secret military projects and had not understood how serious the situation was. When she saw what had happened to the dome, she could barely believe her eyes. The entire botanical archive was covered in green vines. The human plant had spread to every section of the massive dome. It had climbed the walls, covered the ceiling, and wrapped around every support beam. Many of the other plants in the collection were being choked out by the aggressive earth vegetation. "This is impossible," Dr. Tisara said as she walked through what used to be Section 7. "My scans showed this plant had no adaptive capabilities, no special resistance mechanisms. How could it have done this?" Sindara handed her a datapad with the latest readings. "It gets worse. The plant has found ways to break down our crystal, forest specimens, and use their minerals for growth. It is actually eating our most advanced bioengineered creations." Dr. Tisara looked at the data in shock. Velthrin crystal forests were their greatest achievement. They were living trees made of biological crystal that could reshape landscapes and extract metals from the ground. Nothing should be able to harm them. "Look at this section," Sindara said, leading her to what used to house their prize crystal grove. Where tall, beautiful crystal trees once stood, there were now thick masses of green vines. The vines had somehow broken down the crystal structures and absorbed them into their own growth. "The plant is not just surviving in our environment," Sindara continued. "It is thriving. It is using our own technology as food, and it is spreading beyond the dome." Dr. Tisara's head snapped up. "What do you mean, beyond the dome?" Sindara activated a wall display showing aerial images of the area around the botanical archive. Green patches were visible in several locations across the capital city. The plant had somehow escaped the supposedly sealed environment of the dome and was now growing in the wild. "The spores entered our air circulation system 2 weeks ago," Sindara explained. "From there, they spread to the city's atmospheric processing centers. The plant is now growing in our water treatment facilities, our air purification plants, and our agricultural stations." Dr. Tisara felt sick. "Have you informed the High Chancellor?" "I have tried. His office says he is too busy with military planning to deal with botanical issues. They told me to handle it myself." Dr. Tisara grabbed her communication device and sent an emergency code to the High Chancellor's personal line. This was a code that meant immediate threat to the Empire. It could not be ignored. Within an hour, High Chancellor Ziskar arrived at the Botanical Archive with a full military escort. When he saw the destruction inside the dome, his yellow eyes blazed with anger. "How did this happen?" he demanded. This facility contains specimens from our entire empire. Some of these plants took centuries to cultivate. Dr. Tisara swallowed. Hard. High Chancellor, I made an error in my original analysis of the human plant. It appears to have capabilities that our scanners could not detect. What kind of capabilities? Rapid adaptation to new environments, resistance to all known biosuppression methods, the ability to break down and consume advanced biological materials, and most concerning, the ability to interfere with our bioneural interfaces. The High Chancellor's expression grew darker. Explain that last part. Dr. Tisara gestured to a section where Veilthrin maintenance workers were trying to operate their bio-linked tools. The workers looked frustrated and confused. Their equipment was not responding to their neural commands. The plant releases chemical compounds that disrupt the biological connections between our people and our technology. Dr. Tisara said, our workers cannot properly interface with their tools. Our bioships cannot maintain stable neural links with their pilots. The plant is essentially jamming our most important technological systems. High Chancellor Zexkar stared at the green chaos that had consumed their botanical archive. For the first time in his long life, he felt afraid. The Veilthrin Empire depended on biotechnology. Their ships, their weapons, their cities, everything was connected through biological neural networks. If the human plant could disrupt those connections, it was not just an agricultural problem. It was a threat to their entire civilization. What do we know about this plant's origin? He asked. It was the gift from the human ambassador Jake Morrison. They called it a symbol of human persistence and adaptation. Contact the humans immediately. Tell them we need their help to control this plant. Offer them whatever they want in exchange for a solution. On Earth, Admiral Kate Stevens was in a meeting with the Human Defense Council when Jake Morrison's report arrived. She read it quickly and then smiled at the other council members. Gentlemen, Phase 3 is ahead of schedule. The Veilthrins are requesting our assistance with what they call an ecological crisis on their home world. General Paul Hayes leaned forward. How bad is the situation? According to our intelligence, the plant has consumed their primary botanical research facility and is spreading throughout their capital city. More importantly, it is interfering with their bioneural technology. Their military capabilities are being compromised. The council members exchanged satisfied looks. For decades, the Veilthrins had threatened other species with their superior technology. They had forced weaker civilizations to surrender through fear of their bioships and neural weapons. Now their greatest strength was becoming their greatest weakness. What should we tell them? Jake Morrison asked. Admiral Stevens thought for a moment. Send a team of botanists to assess the situation. Dr. Parker should lead the team. Let them maintain the pretense that we are surprised by the plant's behavior and want to help find a solution. Dr. Lisa Parker received her orders that evening. She would travel to Velthara Prime with a team of scientists who were supposedly experts in earth plant biology. Their mission was to appear helpful while secretly documenting the plant's success and preparing for the final phase of their plan. 3 days later, Dr. Parker and her team arrived on Velthara Prime. The Veilthrins met them with desperate gratitude. High Chancellor Zexkar himself came to greet the human scientists. Thank you for coming so quickly, he said. We need your help to understand what is happening to your plant. It is behaving in ways that our science cannot explain. Dr. Parker put on her most concerned expression. We are just as surprised as you are, High Chancellor. This plant should not be able to survive in your environment, let alone spread like this. We will do everything we can to help you find a solution. As their ship landed near the botanical archive, Dr. Parker looked out. The window at the green vines covering the crystal city. Everything was working exactly as they had planned. The Veilthrins had underestimated human ingenuity And now they were paying the price for their arrogance. The plant they had mocked as harmless was consuming their world, one building at a time. And the humans they had dismissed as primitive were the only ones who could save them. But salvation would come with a price that the proud Velthran Empire was not yet ready to understand. Dr. Parker checked her equipment and prepared to begin the most important performance of her life. She had to convince the Velthrans that humanity was just as confused and concerned as they were, while secretly preparing for the moment when Earth would reveal the true power of human patience and planning. 3 months had passed since Dr. Parker and her team arrived on Velthara Prime. The situation had grown worse every single day. The human plant now covered most of the capital city. The beautiful crystal towers were wrapped in thick green vines. The glass trees in the royal gardens had been broken down and consumed. Even the palace of High Chancellor Zexkar was disappearing under layers of earth vegetation. Dr. Parker stood in what used to be the central plaza of the city. Green vines covered every surface. The Velthran people walked through the streets, looking lost and confused. Their bioneural interfaces no longer worked properly. They could not communicate with their technology. They could not control their vehicles or access their computer systems. Dr. Parker called Sindara as she approached through the vines. "We have received more reports from our orbital stations. The plant has somehow reached our bioships in space. Several vessels have lost life support systems." Dr. Parker nodded gravely. "This is very concerning. Our research team is working around the clock to understand how the plant has developed these capabilities. We have never seen anything like this from Earth vegetation." Of course, Dr. Parker knew exactly what was happening. The plant was performing perfectly according to its design. The microscopic spores had found their way onto Velthran ships through the air recycling systems. Once aboard, they had begun growing in the ship's biological components, slowly taking control of their living systems. High Chancellor Zexkar called an emergency meeting in his throne room. The once grand chamber was now barely recognizable. Vines hung from the ceiling like curtains. The walls were covered in green leaves. Even the High Chancellor's throne was wrapped in tendrils of the Earth plant. "Dr. Parker," the High Chancellor said, his voice filled with desperation, "you must tell me honestly. Is there any way to stop this plant?" Dr. Parker looked around the room at the assembled Velthran leaders. They all looked defeated. Their proud empire was crumbling around them, and they did not understand how it had happened so quickly. "High Chancellor," she said carefully, "I must be honest with you. This plant has adapted far beyond anything we thought possible. It has developed capabilities that do not exist in nature on Earth. It is almost as if it was specifically designed to thrive in your environment." Dr. Tisara, who had been studying the plant for months, spoke up. "That should be impossible. Evolution does not work that fast. Plants cannot develop new abilities in just a few months. Unless," Dr. Parker said slowly, "the plant already had those abilities hidden in its genetic structure. Unless it was engineered to activate certain capabilities only when it encountered the right environmental triggers." The room fell silent. High Chancellor Zexkar stared at Dr. Parker with growing understanding. "Are you suggesting that this plant was deliberately modified before it was given to us?" Dr. Parker held his gaze. "I am suggesting that someone wanted to make sure this plant could survive and thrive no matter where it was planted. The question is who would do such a thing, and why?" Before anyone could answer, alarms began sounding throughout the palace. A Velthran soldier rushed into the throne room. "High Chancellor, we have lost contact with the outer colonies. The bioships stationed there are no longer responding to commands." Another soldier followed quickly behind. "Sir, the agricultural stations on the eastern continent have gone dark. All crop production has stopped." High Chancellor Zexkar stood up from his vine-covered throne. How many ships do we still have under full control? Less than 20%. Sir, the plant has infected the life support systems of most of our fleet. The crews are trapped aboard ships they can no longer pilot. Dr. Parker watched as the reality of the situation sank in for the Veilthrin leaders. Their mighty empire was being destroyed not by weapons or armies, but by a simple plant from a world they had considered primitive and harmless. There is something else, Dr. Tissara said quietly. I have been analyzing the plant's genetic structure more carefully. I found artificial modifications hidden deep in its DNA. This plant was deliberately engineered by someone with very advanced knowledge of genetics. High Chancellor, Zexkar turned to face Dr. Parker directly. His yellow eyes burned with anger and fear. Dr. Parker, I am going to ask you one more time. Did your people know what this plant would do when they gave it to us? Dr. Parker was quiet for a long moment. Around the room, Veilthrin leaders waited for her answer. Outside the palace windows, they could see their beautiful crystal city disappearing under an ocean of green vegetation. Finally, Dr. Parker spoke. High Chancellor, I think it is time for complete honesty between our species. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small device. She pressed a button on the device and spoke into it. Admiral Stevens, this is Dr. Parker. Please activate the genetic control sequence. Authorization code Kudzu 77 Alpha. The Veilthrins stared at her in confusion. They did not understand what she had just done. But Dr. Parker knew that her message would reach Earth in a few hours. And Earth would send back a signal that would travel across space to Velthara Prime. What did you just do? High Chancellor Zexkar demanded. I contacted my real superiors, Dr. Parker said. You see, I am not just a botanist. I am part of a special human military project. The plant we gave you was not a gift of friendship. It was a weapon. The room erupted in angry voices. Veilthran soldiers reached for their weapons, but found that their bio-neural interfaces were not working. Their weapons would not respond to their commands. You used biological warfare against us, Dr. Tissara said in shock. You deliberately destroyed our world. We defended ourselves, Dr. Parker replied calmly. Your empire has conquered 12 star systems. You have enslaved dozens of species. You are planning to do the same to humanity. We simply decided to act first. High Chancellor Zexkar's voice was filled with rage. We offered you a place in our empire. We would have protected you as slaves, Dr. Parker said, just like all the other species you have conquered. Humans do not accept slavery, High Chancellor. We prefer to fight, but you cannot fight us with military force. Your weapons are primitive. Your ships are slow. You have no real army. Dr. Parker smiled. You are right. We cannot fight you with guns and ships. So we fought you with patience and intelligence. We studied your weaknesses. We learned that your entire civilization depends on biotechnology. And we created a weapon that could turn your greatest strength into your greatest weakness. As if, responding to her words, more alarms began sounding throughout the palace. Reports came in from across the empire. Agricultural worlds were losing their crops. Military bases were losing control of their defenses. Trade routes were shutting down as ships lost their ability to navigate. The plant is not just growing randomly, Dr. Parker explained. It is programmed to target the biological systems that your empire depends on. Your crystal forests, your bioships, your neural interfaces. Everything that makes you powerful is being systematically destroyed. High Chancellor Zexkar slumped back onto his throne. How do we stop it? You cannot. Stop it with Veilthrin technology. The plant was designed to resist every countermeasure your science could develop. Only humans know how to control it. Then help us, the High Chancellor pleaded. We will give you whatever you want, resources, territory, technology. Just make it stop. Dr. Parker looked around the room at the desperate Veilthran leaders. These were the same aliens who had laughed at humanity's gift just 9 months ago. They had called humans primitive and weak. Now they were begging for mercy. The terms are very simple, Dr. Parker said. Complete surrender of all Veilthran military forces. Withdrawal from all conquered territories. Submission to human oversight of your government and technology. And formal recognition of Earth as the dominant power in this region of space. The terms were harsh. They meant the end of the Veilthran Empire as an independent power. High Chancellor Zex Kar would become little, more than a human puppet ruler. But outside the palace, the green vines continued to grow. Every hour that passed meant more systems failing, more ships lost, more of their civilization consumed by the Earth plant. If we agree to your terms, the High Chancellor asked, will you really be able to stop the plant? Dr. Parker nodded. The plant has a genetic kill switch built into its DNA. When I contacted Earth, I requested activation of that switch. In approximately 6 hours, you will receive a signal from our home world. That signal will cause the plant to begin dying back to manageable levels. And if we refuse your terms, then the plant will continue to grow until your entire empire is nothing but green vegetation. Your people will survive, but your civilization will be completely destroyed. High Chancellor Zex Kar closed his eyes. He thought about the proud empire his ancestors had built over thousands of years. He thought about the worlds they had conquered, the species they had enslaved, the power they had wielded across the galaxy dot. All of it was being destroyed by a simple plant from a world they had considered harmless. When he opened his eyes again, he looked directly at Dr. Parker. We accept your terms. 6 hours later, as promised, a signal arrived from Earth. The signal was broadcast from powerful transmitters and reached every corner of Velthara Prime. When the signal touched the human plant, genetic switches deep in.